The call came 3 days after they forced me to resign, and it wasn't from my boss. "Ms. Whitmore," the man said, voice tight, careful. "This is Daniel Price, corporate counsel for Hawthorne Systems. I need to ask you something about your resignation letter." I didn't answer right away. I had learned, over 23 years, that silence makes people reveal more than questions ever do. He cleared his throat. "Do you still have a copy of your original employment agreement, the one you signed when you first joined the company?" That was when I understood, not everything, but enough. "My name is Sarah Whitmore. I am 56 years old. And until 3 days ago, I had worked at Hawthorne Systems in Boston for most of my adult life. I had walked out quietly, exactly the way they wanted. No scene, no anger. Just a single page I wrote myself and handed in before security escorted me out like a formality. Now the company's lawyer was calling me before 9 in the morning, asking about a contract signed decades ago. "I believe I do," I said evenly. Another pause. I could hear paper shifting on his end. The faint sound of someone breathing too fast. "Just to clarify," he continued, "your letter states that your resignation is effective upon receipt of full settlement of all contractual obligations. Can you explain what you intended by that language?" I looked at my phone, then at the kitchen table where my copy of that contract sat inside a worn folder. I didn't touch it. "It means exactly what it says," I replied. Silence stretched between us. He did not rush to fill it this time. "I see," he said finally. "We may need to revisit the circumstances surrounding your departure." "I'm sure you will," I said. Then I ended the call. Afterward, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. That was new. The story you are about to hear is a fictional work created by the writing team at Revengeaita. It is inspired by real workplace dynamics and power imbalances many professionals face, but all characters, companies, and events have been crafted for storytelling purposes. Each story carries its own message, shaped by different choices, consequences, and truths. This one is about what happens when loyalty is mistaken for weakness, and how preparation can quietly change the outcome. Later that morning, as the city outside went on with its routines, I sat down and opened the folder I hadn't looked at in years, if they were finally reading closely. Then it was time to remember how all of this had started. Loyalty, I learned early, is measured by how much people assume you will tolerate without complaint. "Sarah, can you stay a little late?" my manager asked during my first year, "just until the numbers reconcile." "I can," I said. I always said I could. That was how it started at Hawthorne Systems. I joined in my early 30s, newly married, eager to prove I belonged. My first title was Junior Operations Analyst. My starting pay was $46,000 a year. I didn't negotiate. I was grateful just to be there. "You're steady," my supervisor told me during my first review. Not flashy, but solid. Solid became dependable. Dependable became invisible. Over the years, the titles changed. Analyst, senior analyst, operations lead, director. Each promotion came with more responsibility and less recognition. When systems broke, they called me. When audits loomed, they asked me to sit in. When executives needed historical numbers from contracts signed before they arrived, someone would say, "Ask Sarah. She'll know." I knew because I stayed. "Can you take this on too?" a vice president asked once, sliding a project across the table that wasn't mine. "It's outside my scope," I said carefully. He smiled. "But you'll handle it better than anyone else." So I did. I missed anniversaries. I took calls during hospital waiting rooms. I once joined a conference call from my car outside my daughter's recital because the quarterly report had an error no one else could find. "Thank you for always being flexible," Human Resources told me. They never said thank you for staying. By the time I reached my 50s, I was managing teams who didn't know how half the systems worked without me. I trained people who would later be paid more. I fixed mistakes quietly so no one else would look bad. "You're the backbone of this place," a colleague whispered once after a long night. I smiled, but something tightened in my chest. Because backbones are only noticed when they break. "Thank you for coming in," Sarah, the CEO, said, folding his hands as if we were about to discuss next quarter's goals instead of my future. His name was Robert Hale. I had reported to 3 CEOs over the years. He had been there for 11 months. "We'll keep this brief," he continued. "I know you value professionalism." I nodded. I had learned that nodding cost less than speaking. "This company is evolving," Robert said. And with change comes difficult conversations. He paused, then looked directly at me. I think you should leave while your dignity is still intact. The words were smooth, practiced, delivered without heat. I'm not being terminated, I asked. No, he said quickly. Nothing like that. We simply believe this is the right moment for a graceful exit. Graceful exit. Karen Miller from Human Resources slid a folder across the table. She had joined Hawthorne Systems 6 years after I did. Survived every reorganization by mastering the language of concern. This is just a formality, she said. A standard resignation letter. It allows everyone to move forward positively. I opened the folder. 1 page, my name already typed. Effective immediately. Full release of claims. Non-disparagement. Final settlement. I didn't say I wanted to resign, I said quietly. Robert leaned back. We're trying to protect you. Sarah, a termination raises questions. A resignation preserves your reputation. And if I don't sign, I asked. Karen smiled. Thin and careful. Then we may need to reassess performance alignment. I had 17 years of written reviews that said I exceeded expectations. They knew that. I knew they knew. Robert glanced at his watch. Take a few minutes, he said. But we do need an answer today. I closed the folder and rested my hand on top of it. My pulse stayed steady. That surprised me. I understand, I said. I stood, nodded once, and walked out with the folder still unopened in my hands. They believed silence meant agreement. They were wrong. The letter looked harmless at first glance. 1 page, clean margins, polite language. Take your time, Karen had said. As if time were something I had been offered instead of rationed. I sat alone and read it slowly, the way I had learned to read contracts after years of cleaning up other people's mistakes. The first line declared my resignation effective immediately. The second thanked the company for opportunities. The third released Hawthorne Systems, its executives, its board, and its future owners from any and all claims. Known or unknown. Known or unknown. My hand tightened around the paper. The next paragraph barred me from speaking negatively about the company, its leadership, or its practices. Another confirmed that the severance 4 weeks of pay constituted full and final settlement of all obligations. 4 weeks, after 23 years. This is standard. Karen's voice echoed in my head. It protects everyone, it protected them. I picked up the pen they had left on the table. It was heavy, expensive, meant to feel official. My name was already typed at the bottom. All that was missing was my signature. For a moment, I felt the weight of it all at once. The exhaustion, the fear of being labeled difficult. The quiet panic that comes when stability disappears without warning. Just sign it, a small voice inside me whispered. Be done. I pressed the pen to the paper, then I stopped. The language was too final, too clean. It erased not just my job, but my history, my leverage, my right to respond. It assumed I would leave grateful and silent. I stood up and walked back to Karen's office. The unsigned letter folded once in my hand. I need time, I said. Her smile froze for half a second. We were hoping to close this today. I won't sign anything today, I replied. I need to review it properly. Robert's door was open down the hall. He looked up when he heard our voices. Is there a problem, he asked? No, I said calmly. I just don't make permanent decisions under pressure. I walked out before either of them could respond. That pause, small, quiet, deliberate, was the first decision I made entirely for myself. My lawyer's office was small and quiet, the kind of place where people came to say things they could not say anywhere else. Richard Bloom didn't interrupt as I spread everything across his desk. Performance reviews going back nearly 2 decades. Emails thanking me for fixing problems that were not mine. The resignation letter Hawthorne wanted me to sign, the one I hadn't. He read without comment, his finger tracing lines, his eyes slowing at certain phrases. They didn't fire you, he said finally. They pushed. That was the point, I replied. They wanted me to leave without making noise. He nodded. And they gave you a letter that would have made sure you never could. I exhaled, a tension I hadn't named loosening slightly. They offered 4 weeks of pay, said it was generous. It's tidy, Richard said, not generous. He reached the resignation letter and stopped. This waiver is broad, he said, very broad. I noticed. Good, he said. Then he leaned back in his chair and looked at me directly. Now I need to ask you something. I waited. Do you still have the original employment agreement you signed when you first joined the company? The question caught me off guard, the one from my first year. Yes, he said. Before the mergers, before the acquisitions, before the new leadership. I think so, I said slowly. It should be in a box at home. Richard's expression didn't change, but something sharpened in his voice. That contract matters more than anything they handed you last week. Why, I asked. Because long-term agreements often contain protections no one remembers until it's inconvenient, he said, especially when ownership changes. He slid the resignation letter back toward me. Do not sign this, not yet, and do not let them rush you again. I nodded. They won't. Richard stood and opened a file drawer. Find that contract, he said. When you do, call me. There are reasons companies prefer resignations to terminations. I gathered my papers, my hands steady now. On the way out, he added quietly, people assume old documents lose power with time. Sometimes they gain it. When I returned to Hawthorne Systems, Robert Hale was already seated at the conference table, his jacket draped over the chair like he planned to be done quickly. Karen Miller sat beside him, folders stacked neatly in front of her. Have you had time to think? Robert asked. I have, I said, taking the seat across from them. I'm prepared to resign. Karen's shoulders eased. That's a wise decision, Sarah, but I won't be signing your letter, I added. The relief on Robert's face stalled halfway into confusion. Excuse me, I'll write my own resignation, I said, in my own words. Karen glanced at Robert, then back at me. That's not necessary. The document we provided covers everything. I'm sure it does. I replied. For you. Robert leaned forward. Let's not complicate this. We're offering you a clean exit. I'm not complicating anything, I said evenly. I'm resigning. I just won't use language I didn't choose. There was a pause. I could see Robert calculating how much this mattered. He believed the outcome was already decided. Fine, he said at last. Write your letter. We'll need it today. You'll have it, I said. Back in my car, my phone buzzed. A message from Richard Bloom appeared on the screen. One sentence, 42 words, no explanations, no embellishments. I read it once, then again. My thumb hovered over the reply. Are you sure? I typed. Yes, came his response. Exactly as written. Do not add or remove anything. At home. I opened my laptop and stared at the blank page longer than I expected. The sentence looked ordinary, almost polite. It did not sound like revenge. It sounded like precision. I hesitated, thinking of how easily this could go wrong. Then I printed it on company letterhead, signed my name in blue ink, and folded the page once. When I walked back into the building, I was calm. That seemed to unsettle them more than anger ever could. Karen took the letter from my hand without looking up. Thank you, Sarah. We'll process this immediately. Robert glanced at the page for less than a second. This is fine, he said. We'll have your final paperwork ready by the end of the week. I watched his eyes move across the paper. He didn't slow down. He didn't pause at the middle. Where the language shifted, he assumed it said what all resignation letters say. I'll need confirmation in writing, I said. Karen nodded, already stacking the letter with other documents. You'll receive an email by close of business. That email arrived less than an hour later. We acknowledge receipt of your resignation. It read, your final day of employment is effective immediately. They had missed it. By the next morning, my access badge no longer opened the parking gate. My work email stopped syncing. A message from payroll followed shortly after, outlining my final paycheck, my accrued vacation payout, and instructions for returning equipment. No one called, no one asked a question. At lunch, a colleague texted me, heard you're gone. I'm so sorry. I'm not. I typed back. I didn't explain. 2 days passed like that. Systems closing, accounts disabled, the company moving on with impressive efficiency. On the third day, I noticed something change. My email access returned without explanation. No message, no apology. Just a silent restoration, as if someone had tripped over a wire and tried to put it back before anyone noticed. An hour later, my phone rang. I didn't answer. A voicemail followed. It wasn't from Robert. It wasn't from Karen. Miss Whitmore, the voice said carefully. This is Daniel Price from Hawthorne Systems Legal Department. We need to discuss the language of your resignation letter. I deleted the voicemail and waited. If they were calling legal, it meant someone had finally read the sentence. The first day passed without a word. No email, no call, nothing from Robert or Karen. Just the quiet confirmation that my access had been removed, then restored, then removed again. Someone inside the company was pulling levers without knowing which ones mattered. On the second day, Richard Bloom called me. "They're reading?" he said, slowly. "Who?" I asked. "Legal." He replied. "Human resources already moved too fast. Payroll followed. Legal is the last stop. And they never like surprises." I didn't tell him about the voicemail. I didn't need to. That afternoon, I opened the box I'd brought home from the office. Old notebooks, project binders, a framed photo from a team dinner years ago. At the bottom was the folder Richard had asked about. Thick paper, yellowed edges. My name typed in a font no one used anymore. I didn't open it yet. By the third morning, doubt crept in. Not panic. Just the quiet kind that asks whether you misread the room, whether confidence had tipped into arrogance, whether one sentence really could hold up against an entire company. My phone buzzed. An internal calendar alert appeared on my screen. Restored without explanation. Status meeting finance leadership. I stared at it, then closed the notification. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. This time I answered. "Ms. Whitmore," the voice said, measured but strained. "This is Daniel Price. We spoke earlier this week." "I remember," I said. "There are questions," he continued. "Regarding your employment status, I assumed there would be." I replied. He paused. "We'd like to clarify certain obligations before anyone proceeds further." In the background, I could hear another voice, low and urgent, cut off abruptly. Daniel lowered his tone. "Would you be available to discuss this today?" "Yes," I said. "When you're ready." I set the phone down and finally opened the folder. They hadn't misread the sentence. They had underestimated everything behind it. The call came just after lunch. "Miss Whitmore," Daniel Price said, his voice careful in a way it hadn't been before. "Thank you for making time to speak with us." "Of course," I replied. "I want to be very clear," he continued. "This conversation is exploratory. We're simply trying to ensure there's alignment on the circumstances of your departure." "Go on," I said. He paused, choosing words the way people do when they are afraid of choosing the wrong ones. "It's been brought to our attention that certain remarks made during your final meeting may have been misinterpreted." I waited. "The phrase regarding leaving with your dignity intact," he said, "was not intended as an ultimatum." "Then what was it intended to be?" I asked. Another pause. Papers shifted. Someone whispered on his end, too close to the receiver. "Our position," Daniel said, "is that the company values your contributions and regrets any discomfort caused by that discussion." "I see," I said. "We're also reviewing the language of your resignation," he added, "specifically the conditions you referenced." I was very deliberate. I said, "So was my lawyer." "Yes," he said quietly. "We've gathered that." A new voice joined the call. Robert Hale. He sounded different without an audience. "Sarah," he said, forcing warmth into his tone, "I want you to know this was never meant to escalate. We'd like to discuss the possibility of you returning, even temporarily, to do what I asked, to help with the transition," he said. "There's been some disruption. I imagine there has," I said. "We can revisit terms," Daniel added quickly. "Compensation, title, flexibility." I didn't respond. Robert cleared his throat. "You've always been reasonable." I stayed silent. The quiet stretched, not awkward, instructive. Finally, Daniel spoke again. "Please understand. We're trying to avoid unnecessary complications." "I understand perfectly," I said. I ended the call without another word. Afterward, I opened my email and found a draft agreement waiting for my review. It was longer than the resignation letter, much longer. I forwarded it to Richard Bloom and closed my laptop. They weren't afraid of losing me. They were afraid of what my silence allowed next. Walking away, I learned, is not the same as giving up. Richard Bloom called me 2 days after the draft agreement arrived. "They're ready to settle everything properly," he said. "All contractual obligations. Clean terms. No games." "Are they asking me to come back?" I asked. "They are," he replied. "But they're not insisting anymore." That told me everything I needed to know. When the final call came, Daniel Price sounded composed again, the way people do once the panic has passed. "Ms. Whitmore, we've reviewed the documentation. The company will honor the terms outlined in your original agreement. Compensation, benefits, and severance will be handled accordingly. I appreciate the confirmation, I said. There is, of course, the option to discuss a return, he added carefully. I won't be returning, I said, not sharply, not emotionally, just clearly. There was a brief silence. Then, understood, he said. Robert Hale did not join that call. He did not need to. The decision was no longer his to manage. The paperwork arrived later that week. It was thorough, respectful, precise. I read every page, signed where appropriate, and returned it without comment. When it was done, my resignation became final, not because I was pushed out, but because I chose the terms of my exit. On my last official day, no one asked me to clear my desk. No one escorted me out. My access ended quietly, the way it should have from the beginning. I closed my laptop and sat for a moment, not celebrating, not grieving, just steady. The life lesson I carry forward is simple, and hard-earned loyalty should never require silence. And dignity is not something a company grants you. It is something you protect by knowing your value, reading what you sign, and refusing to rush decisions that define your future. When you leave the right way, you take yourself with you intact, unafraid, and clear about what you deserve.